Welcome to English Vidyarthi. Today I am going to teach the chapter The Ghat of the Only World written by Amitav Ghosh. This chapter is included in 11th standard textbook snapshots. Before I begin the chapter, let me just give you a brief introduction about the chapter. This chapter is actually a tribute by Amitav Ghosh to his late friend, the poet Aga Shahid Ali Khan. Aga Shahid Ali Khan was a very well-known Indian poet. He was born and raised in Kashmir, and later on he moved to US. He was diagnosed with dangerous illness, cancer, and then he could not survive for a long time. He died at the age of 52. During his last days, he had requested Amitav Ghosh to write something about him, and Amitav promised him that he will do that. And fulfilling his promise, he writes this chapter as a tribute to his friend. This chapter is quite lengthy, so I'm going to divide this chapter in parts. So you will see the remaining chapter in other videos. So friends, let me start explaining the chapter now. The first time that Aga Shahid Ali spoke to me about his approaching death was on 25 April 2001. The conversation began routinely. I had telephoned to remind him that we had been invited to a friend's house for lunch and that I was going to come by his apartment to pick him up. Although he had been under treatment for cancer for some 14 months, Shahid was still on his feet and perfectly lucid except for occasional lapses of memory. So here the writer says that he came to know about his illness for the first time on 25th April 2001 when Shahid Ali Khan himself spoke to him about this. So he says that when I met him, it had been more than a year that he had been under the treatment for cancer, but still he was perfectly lucid. He was perfectly in his senses. He looked quite fit, except few occasional lapses of memory. However, he used to forget things, but apart from that, no other symptoms were visible to him. That is what the writer tells us. I heard him thumbing through his engagement book, and then suddenly he said, "Oh dear, I can't see a thing." There was a brief pause, and then he added, "I hope this doesn't mean that I'm dying." So, how did he talk to Amitav about his illness? He was actually reading his engagement book, he was reading his diary, he was just overviewing the pages of his diary, and all of a sudden, he was not able to read anything, he was not able to see anything, and then he said, "Oh, it seems that now I'm going to die." So this was for the first time that he started losing his eyesight, and he mentioned this to his friend. Although Shahid and I had talked a great deal over the last many weeks, I had never before heard him touch on the subject of death. Shahid being a poet and Amitav Ghosh also being a writer, they used to talk about various topics, but Shahid never talked about death. And then the writer says that for the first time he touched the subject of death, and unfortunately it was about his own death. I did not know how to respond. His voice was completely at odds with the content of what he had just said, light to the point of jocularity. Amitav says that I did not know how to respond to this statement because though he was talking about his own death, though it was talking about something very serious. His voice was not matching to that. His voice was very different, quite at odds with the content, because generally when people talk about death, there is kind of seriousness in the voice, but here it was quite different. Shahid Ali Khan talked about his death quite playfully, quite light-heartedly. I mumbled something innocuous. No, Shahid, of course not. You will be fine. He cut me short, in a tone of voice that was at once quizzical and direct. He said, "When it happens, I hope you will write something about me." So the writer says that I tried to console him by saying, "Of course, everything will be fine, nothing to worry." But then Shahid Ali Khan stopped him in between, and his question was quite direct, and there was a sense of doubt in his tone. And then he asked him, "When it happens, it means when my death happens, I hope you will write something about me." So here, for the first time, he requests his friend to write about him after his death.